Today, I welcome you to the last episode of the charge of the 95 Mountain Brigade into Dhaka. As you might have known, the 95 Mountain Brigade was a part of the 101 Communication Zone of the Indian Armed Forces. The 101 Communication Zone was under the command of Major General Gurbaksh Singh Gill till the 5th of December 1971, 2 days when the war had started. Now, the 95 Mountain Brigade was commanded by Brigadier Hardev Singh Kler, and on the 5th of December 1971, Brigadier Hardev Singh Kler and Major General Gurbaksh Singh Gill together had encountered an anti-tank mine blast for which Major General Gurbaksh Singh Gill lost the soles of his feet. Hence, the commander of the 101 Communication Zone was replaced by Major General Gandharv Singh Nagra. Till the morning of the 16th of December, the 95 Mountain Brigade under the command of Brigadier Hardev Singh Kler had kept on fighting, alongside liberating the border outpost of Kamalpur, taking the town of Bakshiganj, also liberating Jamalpur and destroying an entire Pakistani infantry battalion, the 31 Baluch, linking up with the paratroopers close to the Pongli Bridge on the evening of the 11th of December 1971 and liberating Tangail, then heading towards the area through Mirzapur, Kashimpur, Savhar, finally reaching Mirpur close to Dhaka by the morning of the 16th of December. Brigadier Hardev Singh Kler was one of the first officers to enter the headquarters of General Niazi. Now let's see what happens next. So as you can see, the 93 Infantry Brigade of the Pakistani Army had two battalions here, the 33 Punjab at Maimansingh and the 31 Baluch at Jamalpur. The 95 Mountain Brigade from here starts from Tura, destroys the Kamalpur border outposts, encircles Bakshiganj, forcing the Pakistanis to flee across the Brahmaputra and heading towards Jamalpur. And then, by a complete encirclement, the entire 31 Baluch is wiped out. Jamalpur is liberated. Close to Tangail, the 2 para from the Indian Armed Forces lands and secures the Pongli Bridge. The 95 Mountain Brigade destroys the entire 93 Brigade that was coming from Maimansingh to Tangail. This entire 93 Infantry Brigade is taken out of action, and the 95 Mountain Brigade links up with the 2 para at Pongli Bridge just north of Tangail. The Pakistanis at Tangail eventually flee towards Dhaka, leaving the city, and also Tangail is liberated by the Indian Armed Forces. The next stop was Dhaka, and slowly the Indian Army moves up, encircles Dhaka. The 95 Mountain Brigade closes in towards Dhaka, taking this area. The 167 Infantry Brigade encircles Dhaka from here. The 167 Brigade is from the 101 Communication Zone, the same division under which the 95 Mountain Brigade was also serving. So the 167 Infantry Brigade encircles from here, and on the 16th of December, Dhaka falls to the Indian Armed Forces. So the 95 Mountain Brigade travels from here all the way and then up to here, entering Dhaka on the morning of 16 December 1971, making history. It was clear that General Niazi wanted to surrender to the Indian Armed Forces. Meeting Brigadier Hardev Singh Kler, the first thing he did was actually ask why he had the maroon turban on. Was he from the paratroopers who had landed close to Tangail? Kler said that he had actually been from the signals. Later, he had earned his para wings. Niazi said that in the Pakistani army, they don't allow officers from the signals to command an infantry brigade. That is the time when Kler said to him that, "No wonder, General, why you lost the war." From Niazi's office, Brigadier Kler took the Pakistani Eastern Command flag, and Major General Gandharv Singh Nagra, the GOC of the 101 Communication Zone, took the Pakistani flag. They all had tea there. After this, Brigadier Kler, with some Mukti Bahini fighters and some of his soldiers, went to the Rai Bazar area in Dhaka and found tons of corpses there. The Mukti Bahini people had informed him about this, and he had just gone to see what was actually happening. These corpses were of the bodies of intellectuals and the cream of the Bengali society, whom the Al-Badr death squad under the Pakistani Armed Forces had actually executed. These executions had started from the 14th of December inside Dhaka and had ended only after the Indian Armed Forces and the Mukti Bahini had entered the city. It was indeed a grisly sight. That day, a lot of things had actually happened. Brigadier Kler was informed by General Nagra that a crowd of local Bengalis had actually surrounded a lot of Pakistani officers inside the Intercontinental Hotel. These Bengali people were actually hounding for their blood. The Pakistani officers were helpless, and as the Pakistani army had decided to surrender, hence, it was a duty of the Indian Armed Forces to provide protection for these Pakistani officers and soldiers. So Brigadier Hardev Singh Kler moved up to the hotel and was greeted by a crowd of cheering local Bengalis. They had lifted him up and was giving slogans for the glory of India and Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. Later, he came down and he asked the crowd to disperse, but he wasn't talking to them in Bengali. Eventually, an Australian man named William A.S. Oderland arrived there and he asked the crowd to disperse in Bengali, saying to them that the Indian armed forces will now take care of this situation. William A.S. Oderland had also worked in covert Mukti Bahini operations inside Dhaka city. He was actually a big officer in Bata Shoe Company in Dhaka. Anyway, Brigadier Kler later moved up inside that hotel, found the scared Pakistani officers inside the lobby and said to them that they were safe as of now. He asked for drinks inside the hotel, gave the drinks to all of the Pakistani officers and asked them to cheer for India and the Indian armed forces, which the Pakistanis eventually did. Later that day, Brigadier Hardev Singh Kler and General Nagra went to the Dhaka airport to receive Major General J.F.R. Jacob, the Chief of Staff of the Eastern Command. Major General Jacob with him had the surrender document for the Pakistani army, which in the evening at 4:30 p.m. Lieutenant General A.A.K. Niazi had signed in front of the foreign correspondents, the All India Radio, tons of local people, Mukti Bahini guards and the Indian army alongside many Indian armed forces officers being taken by Lieutenant General Jagjit Singh Arora, the GOC-in-C of the Eastern Army Command of the Indian Armed Forces. This surrender was going to take place on the historic race course ground of Dhaka. This place was going to witness the history and the birth of a new nation, which will be called from the 16th of December 1971 as Bangladesh. Brigadier Kler himself was in that surrender ceremony, but he just couldn't attend it because the wife of General Arora was also present there, and she was actually being surrounded by a crowd of local people who were actually very happy to see her. But Brigadier Kler had to intervene there and had to move away that crowd. According to the surrender document, these were the things that were needed to be done. Pakistani armed forces would lay down their weapons and head to the nearest position of the Indian armed forces to finally surrender. The Pakistani Eastern Army Command would come under the orders of Lieutenant General Jagjit Singh Arora as soon as the surrender document was going to be signed. Disobedience of such orders would lead to the breach of the terms of surrender, and they were meant to be treated appropriately according to the use of weapons and the laws of war. Pakistani prisoners of war were going to be treated accordingly to the Geneva Conventions by the Indian Armed Forces, and protection would be given to the ethnic minorities, the foreign nationals, and the personnel of the West Pakistan region who will come under the command of General Jagjit Singh Arora after the signing of the surrender document by General Niazi. The second surrender ceremony took place on the 19th of December at the 19th hole at the Dhaka golf course. Here, Major General Jamshed, the GOC of the Pakistani 36th Infantry Division, was going to surrender with his officers and soldiers in this golf club. To witness this surrender, Lieutenant General Sagat Singh, the GOC of the 4th Corps of the Indian Armed Forces, Major General Gandharv Singh Nagra, GOC of the 101 Communication Zone, and Brigadier Hardev Singh Kler himself was going to be present to take the surrender of the Pakistani Armed Forces. At first, Major General Jamshed had arrived with his officers and soldiers, but they didn't bring their weapons with them. Brigadier Kler noticed this and asked them to go back again and bring their weapons and surrender all these weapons at the Dhaka golf course. Eventually, this happened. Major General Jamshed gave a speech for his soldiers and officers, and then Lieutenant General Sagat Singh and Major General Gandharv Singh Nagra gave their own speech for the gallant soldiers and officers of the Indian Armed Forces who had made this day possible. There, Lieutenant General Sagat Singh announced to all the Pakistani soldiers and officers that Brigadier Hardev Singh Kler was going to be the camp commandant of the Pakistani Prisoners of War. That day, about 30,000 ranks of the Pakistani Armed Forces had surrendered at the Dhaka golf course. As the Pakistani army had surrendered officially, it was now the duty of the Indian army to provide protection and to ensure their safety. The Bengalis and the Mukti Bahini was hounding for the blood of the Pakistani army officers and soldiers. So Brigadier Kler was at first asked to make a list of the total number of Pakistani prisoners in Bangladesh. At first he made a list of Pakistani prisoners of war in Dhaka itself, which was about 30,000 alone. This list was meant to be given to the Eastern Army Command in the next 2 days. The next round of figures came up to him was about 70,000, and the further list of POWs was about 84,000. The largest number of prisoners of war that was ever recorded to be captured after the Second World War was here in the liberation of Bangladesh. Brigadier Kler at first decided to keep these Pakistani soldiers and officers inside their own cantonments and even at times allowed them to carry their weapons if needed, if the Bengalis or the Mukti Bahini decided to do something fishy. It was a responsibility according to the Geneva Conventions. Hence, Brigadier Kler had no other option other than to take this risk. His brigade had total 4 battalions and 1 regular artillery regiment. The 4 battalions were the 1st Maratha Light Infantry, the 13th Rajputana Rifles, the 6th Sikh Light Infantry, and the 13th Guards, alongside the 56th Mountain Regiment. Hence, with all these forces, he did his best in providing protection to the Pakistani prisoners of war. He also brought the Pakistani officers and made 6 of them as his own liaison officers and assigned these soldiers and officers some tasks to do in the entire day till they were shipped by January 1972 out from Bangladesh and into prisoner of war camps in India. He was also responsible in providing protection to Lieutenant General A.A.K. Niazi and Major General Rao Farman Ali. Rounding up the prisoners of war, he also found that he didn't only have Pakistani officers and soldiers in his custody, but also the Chief Secretary Muzaffar Hussain, who was the IG Police of Dhaka Division, the Provincial Divisional Commanders, the Civil Service Officers, the staff of Pakistan International Airlines, Customs, and the staff of Pakistan Radio as well, alongside their families, children, who had to be taken care of and saved from the local Bengalis and the Mukti Bahini. It was a very difficult task which he managed, and he kept a good rapport with the prisoners of war, explaining to them what these Pakistani officers and soldiers did to the local people in Bangladesh, for which these people were so angry at them. He explained to them about the war crimes, about the murder, the genocide that the Pakistani army had done, and yet being given such a protection according to the Geneva Conventions. Later, the Pakistani army officers and soldiers accepted their own crimes. Also, for his exceptional behavior, the International Red Cross had given him a memento. For his great services in the Bangladesh Liberation War, Brigadier Hardev Singh Kler was recommended the Mahavir Chakra. And the day when he received it, he was actually in front of the Pakistani prisoners of war. When he heard this and he informed them, Pakistani officers themselves rose up and clapped for him, cheering that he had received the Mahavir Chakra. Imagine that. Brigadier Kler had fought these Pakistanis for so many days, and now, for his exceptional treatment, the enemy was praising him. During his time as camp commandant of the Pakistani prisoners of war, Brigadier Hardev Singh Kler had also met Lieutenant Colonel Sultan Ahmed, the CEO of the 31 Baluch, the Pakistani battalion that was destroyed by the 95 Mountain Brigade at Jamalpur. After some friendly interactions and a hearty breakfast with Brigadier Kler, Lieutenant Colonel Sultan Ahmed decided to talk about the Battle of Jamalpur. He clearly said to Brigadier Kler that the letter for the request for surrender was something that he couldn't treat very seriously. He said that he had done staff college and it was impossible for an entire brigade to cross a formidable obstacle like the big Brahmaputra river north of Jamalpur. And he couldn't believe that there was any way that there was more than a company's strength of troops on the Jamalpur-Tangail road to hold up the entire 31 Baluch. Assuming this, Lieutenant Colonel Sultan Ahmed thought that they might just be easy meat for him. Brigadier Kler smiled at him and said that where Lieutenant Colonel Sultan Ahmed was actually a student, Brigadier Kler himself had taught at Staff College for 4 years. The next thing he said that the mortar barrage of the 31 Baluch on the night of the 10th of December on the positions of the 1st Maratha Light Infantry was a big giveaway for Brigadier Kler to understand that the 31 Baluch would try an escape attempt on that very night. Hearing this, Lieutenant Colonel Sultan Ahmed struck his forehead and his head was down with resignation. Before leaving Dhaka and for the POW camps inside India, and Lieutenant Colonel Sultan Ahmed handed him over that letter of surrender that Brigadier Kler had sent to him during the Battle of Jamalpur. By the March of 1972, the Indian Armed Forces had decided to vacate from Bangladesh. Brigadier Hardev Singh Kler was promoted as Major General and was assigned to take command of the 10th Infantry Division, which was present in the Cham area. So he had to leave Bangladesh, leave his battalions and his entire brigade there to take command of this new responsibility. A Mahavir Chakra receiving brigadier, promoted as Major General, was finally leaving the battlefield after months of fighting. There was a sad thing that happened with Major General Hardev Singh Kler. Years after his retirement from the Indian Army, that anti-tank mine blast that he had encountered on the Bakshiganj-Kamalpur road started taking a toll on his legs. He was eventually living in the USA during his old age, and he was taking treatment there as well. The doctors eventually came to a conclusion that that his legs were not in a very good condition and he had to eventually take a wheelchair. But even after that, his left leg was in a much worse condition. Hence, the doctors came to a conclusion that his left leg had to be amputated. This is the picture of what happened after his leg was gone. People used to ask him that he did so much for Bangladesh, for the liberation of that country, and he lost a leg. He used to say that they got their own liberation. I just lost a leg. So what?